Yeah, I've got to tell you, I watched the entirety of the debate, or whatever the town hall that Anderson Cooper did with Chris Christie, and I've got to say, I think Christie came across very well in it, and I was surprised by how he handled a lot of the issues, and he sort of seemed like he was put together in a weird way, which was pretty interesting to watch. Um, yeah, I don't know. Did you watch it, Tom?
Yeah, I watched. I didn't watch the whole thing from start to finish, but I watched like several of the clips and then some of the longer clips. And yeah, I agree. I mean, so we appreciate his size, right? But I got to tell you, being that big, it's probably pretty taxing to be up there for as long as he is. But he, wasn't sweating. He like had great energy, and I thought he handled himself really well. And you're right, he came across together very nicely and articulated the points that it's just like, wow, this makes sense. And it was, regardless of where it goes, it was just good to hear. Hey, maybe it's his fault. It's not, because that is what it is to be a Republican now, is to blame everybody as to why you can't get anything done. And so anyway, that it was positive. It was very good, I thought.
Yeah, I think he was in command of the room. And I don't think it's easy to do that kind of thing just for hours at a stretch to take any question, particularly from a hostile media. I thought he acquitted himself well. I, I think he kind of needs a more compelling vision than he's got. Sort of not enough to just vote out Trump. And, when he talks about a bigness, it's like obviously that's pretty clever of like taking your detractor's argument that you're fat or whatever and using it as a frame. But what is like the real national vision? It's not quite there yet. It hasn't quite come together. I thought he did a good job talking about drug addiction and just addiction generally and how it's plaguing the country. And I also thought he did a great job explaining the prosecution of Trump and what's really going on there and how they very obviously have a lot more material. Um, I had a sort of falling out with Congressman Gates today about the Jack Smith, prosecution of Trump, where I just told Gates that he needed to like wake the fuck up, and he didn't want to, and so I said, all right, we're done here, and so told him not to contact me again. So I think it was the right call, but I don't feel good about it. But I think it was the right decision. I think at a certain point, you can give people two or three chances, but I think at a certain point, there's a lot of people who want to go down with the Trump cult, and I'm just not here for that. So, it just is what it is.
Yeah, that's bad. He's had a lot of like self destructive moves. I mean, the Tara Reid hoax, uh, you know, and he's like cozying up with freaking Marjorie Taylor Greene. It's just such a bad look because he came across as a leader and a future like big time leader, in my opinion, with how he handled the Kevin McCarthy situation, at least the vote for Speaker of the House.
Well, I have a theory about this, by the way. So, do you want to hear what my theory
Yeah,
is?
and just the last part is he's able to talk to people across the aisle and actually do some things. So that was impressive. Anyway,
Yeah, though it oftentimes seems like it's a marketing poise or marketing play than an actual sincere policy. Like, I think that there are these people who are very good in life about just getting headlines constantly. And I don't think that they're all that serious about actually implementing policy and getting real things done. So, when it comes to McCarthy, I mean, it's no secret that McCarthy's a criminal. And, like, if you look at his family history of, like, stealing from the Navy, of all this kind of, like, shady shit he's done over the years. But by publishing a lot of that stuff, we gave Joe Biden the leverage that he needed to get a good deal on the trade deficit or on the debt ceiling deal. And so my attitude generally is that like Joe Biden has Kevin McCarthy like right where he wants him. And I think that this is net beneficial for all of us. I've never been persuaded that the national debt is a serious issue, just generally. I think it's one of those things where people, I mean, what are they going to do? Like, China's going to come over here and like repossess everything? Like, come and take it, right? So I've oftentimes thought that our debt composition, we can use it as a negotiating play. Like, we are the dominant power on the planet. There are 330 million of us. We have the best military, arguably the best intelligence service. Like, we are an economic behemoth. And this idea that like we have to worry about the national debt, I think it's just very small, very pathetic in how people frame it. And so my read basically is Joe Biden had Kevin's number and he keeps punching it. And I think Gates and the Freedom Caucus, which he's aligned with, I think they're not getting like how much they're being steamrolled right now. And it's because they haven't really done the serious work of coming up with a national agenda, one that could actually be like a loyal opposition working with Biden at times. Instead, they want to play this whole like, oh, two cock style argument of like, oh, Joe Biden had classified material too. And it's like, Joe Biden didn't like take 64 boxes with him, like to Bedminster, to fly from Florida. I mean, like the level of just weird shit that Trump has gotten into, weird criminal shit, it's just like it kind of beggars belief. Like it really is kind of nutty.
Christie
And
described it really well tonight when he's like, he talks about it it's in the indictment. My boxes, like they're his precious, like in the Lord, like he has to keep him close to him wherever he goes.
yeah, and I think we all kind of know what was happening, right? Like Trump had all these visitors down to Mar-a-Lago, some of them were spies, and he would just like trot out whatever document was around and like wave it around to show that he was significant, that he was in the mix or whatever. And it's pretty clear that a number of countries, namely the Saudis, basically bought Trump. And that's kind of what the Live Gulf deal is about. And obviously, you've seen the rollback of Sturgeon, Nicola Sturgeon in Scotland. Obviously, Trump had that unexplained wealth order that was brought against him, back in the day in the UK, and Sturgeon and her government in Scotland squashed that, and now they're being brought down. So clearly, there's a role of like money laundering, moving money with Trump, using golf courses as a vehicle for doing that. And I've tweeted about that. If people are curious, we can maybe talk about that some more. I've got some articles on it. But yeah, just generally speaking, I'm of the view that basically Trump is being turned off now, and that it's kind of a global effort that's turning off a number of people, turning off Boris Johnson, obviously, whose brother worked for Binance, who is very in league with the Netanyahu Israelis. And I think that this is going to be a major feature of the next 5, 10 years, are the people whose careers just kind of abruptly end. And I think it's all to the good, to be honest with you. Long overdue. But anyway, Richard, welcome, Richard. Did you watch the town hall?
Not all of it, because I've some kid duties, but I have watched a good 30 minutes of clips, and it was all good. I have to jump in with a little bit of a joke. Lopez Motor Cars is saying like it was amazing that a man that big was able to stand. I'm not. It's. I mean, I'm just joshing here. It's just kind of funny that like our bar is so low. We're like, I mean, he literally did not die while on stage. Like, we need to give this guy a lot of credit.
I mean, Richard, let's be honest here, though. I mean, he is a large man.
Oh yeah.
I mean, just is what it is. And I will say, I've met.
Hey, did you see how bad Ron DeSantis was sweating the other night? He had his nipples sticking through a white dress shirt. So
yeah, it's true. Yeah, it's true. I mean, all that blubber is like it's like a big cooling blanket on Christie. Like it just keeps him cool.
I spoke with the Christie campaign today, and sort of offered to help in whatever way I could, saying that I think it's going to be Joe Biden versus Chris Christie in the final analysis. And I think that's basically right. I think I'd probably give the edge to Joe Biden going into 24, but I think Christie will actually do very, very well.
Well, I mean, look, Christie, I agree with also something that you said where he's not really pronouncing a vision or an agenda or something like this. He's kind of prosecuting Trump. And so that is a criticism, but he's got one part right. I mean, in his announcement town hall, he really just nailed it. And he just showed up the entire Republican field. He said, there is one way to the nomination, and it is through Trump. Either he is going to beat you or you're going to beat him and walk over his corpse to the nomination. There is no other way to do this. And so you're like shadow boxing, or you're practicing and you're not playing the game unless you're going after Trump. And this is just exactly correct. And you can make all these like weird arguments about why it isn't correct, but like everyone knows it's correct. Like the guy down, your average football coach knows that like you've got to take on your arch enemy in order to prove you're the best. It's just how it works. And I think Christie is kind of this, he's obviously an educated and smart guy. I mean, I don't want to take, he's a prosecutor. I don't want him prosecuting me. I mean, for God's sake. I get it, but like he's also kind of like a normal dude, and he just is able to get this on a visceral level. I think he has genuine criticisms of Trump, but he just gets it. Like, just don't even try to do this if you are going to be Trump light, or, I'm even like more conservative than Trump, but I love Trump like DeSantis. It's just never going to possibly work. No one will pick up this like fake Rolex on the ground when you have this like authentic, real deal standing in front of you. And that's what Trump is. I mean, again, Trump's a total disaster, but he's an authentic disaster. He's like a fully certified catastrophe. And all of these other people are trying to be like the knockoff, like bargain basement catastrophe that you can buy. And it just makes no fucking sense. And Christie just gets this. And so I applaud him like merely for that. And I agree, it's either going to be Trump or Christie. DeSantis is just done. The guy is a complete joke. All of these influencers who he hired are like morons, and they are just like daily harming his chances, even though he had no real chances. They're just harming him, and he's has terrible advisors. I mean, it's just a complete joke. The guy's not at all attractive to anyone. It's just never going to happen. So Christie was right. It's going to be a mano battle. And I don't know if he can do it, but if anyone else is going to do it, it's going to be Christie, period, end of statement.
Yeah. And I also think that, honestly, I think Christie actually poses the greatest challenge to Joe Biden too, because, it will be the case that Joe Biden is 82 years old by the time his second term begins. And like people know, you and I are Joe Biden fans, but like 82 is 82, like it's not a joke. And I don't know for those of us who had, kind of aging parents, like you don't age gradually, like you hit a wall at certain ages and you just kind of don't make it anymore. Now, I happen to like a lot of Joe Biden's policies. I happen to think that he's actually pretty capable. He's certainly a lot more capable than I thought he would be going into 2020. So I'm not a hater, you know what I mean? But I do worry about that. I will say, and I'm not a fan of Kamala. Like Kamala is like clearly not ready for prime time,
Yeah, I
and
agree with all this.
you just you run the actuarial tables out and you want to be charitable, and like Joe Biden is in good health, like like I'm not here to whatever, but Christie is 60, okay, and his point about age tonight I think was well taken. Now, what does this mean? Will Joe Biden's, don't know. It's a very interesting question, like what will happen here, because it's clear that when you hear Christie talk about Joe Biden, it's way too performative. It's very clear that he does not dislike Joe Biden nearly as much as he hates Trump. And I think that
Yeah.
this is actually like it seems like a very like Delaware mafia kind of thing going on here, where he's making the case against Trump, and I think it's basically working. You know, if he goes on stage and we get the camera of if we see on camera Donald Trump reacting to Chris Christie talking shit about Jared Kushner, I think that that'll be very telling. I don't think Trump can handle somebody actually going hard against him. I just don't think it's possible. So
do you think Trump will agree to go on stage? Because he's been saying like, "Oh, I don't want to go on a debate stage." What do you think will happen?
I don't know. I mean, he would be foolish not to take up the debate challenge because he needs to reassure everyone. And if he's like being indicted multiple places, I mean, he's going to be indicted again in Georgia, right? They would have already dismissed this case.
I think Jack Smith is going after the J6 thing, and I think there's also going to be some big indictments coming down with people who aren't as obvious, in the sense that they've done all the people who, broke windows and trampled in the Capitol, etc. Um, they haven't, and they've attacked Donald Trump, of course, but they haven't really gone after a lot of the middle people. And I think there's going to be another flurry. We're a year out from the J6 Commission. I think there's going to be a flurry of indictments of the kind of middle people. They have sedition, convictions of Proud Boys and Oath Keepers, etc.
Yeah.
They have that as a precedent, and a lot of these people who are kind of like in the middle of all this kind of stuff. I mean, literally and figuratively, like the middle management of J6. I think they're going to go after them in the coming like 6 to 9 months.
I got to tell you, the two people who looked very presidential in the last week, other than Christie and Biden, I think Newsom. You watched that Newsom interview with Sean Hannity, and that was pretty powerful stuff. I don't know if people have seen that as yet, but it's well worth watching, where he just very mercilessly prosecutes the case against DeSantis. So I don't know, man. It seems to me like we have a real game going on now. Like this is going to be a very interesting election, and I think my takeaway is that the John Kerry approach was that America should be the world's prosecutor, sharing intelligence, sharing information, but really like we should not be the world's policeman. I think this is basically correct. And I think it's something that both Christie and Biden have in common. It's nice to see Biden not throw Ukraine under the bus. Christie not throw Ukraine under the bus. The Ron DeSantis stuff, I kind of feel like Ron DeSantis is like trying to invite me to a cult that I don't want to join. And the Trump cult is actually like kind of more fun. It just might put you in federal prison. So it's sort of like DeSantis is like white collar crime. Donald Trump is like blue collar crime. It's kind of how I've come to think about it. And I just don't think we want this shit anymore. Like those of us who are registered Republicans, it's like it just doesn't seem to work, as much as it once did. And I think the ability of like DeSantis, he's just not good at it. He's got his like memorized talking points. It's just not a thing, it doesn't quite work. And you look at Christie and you're like, all right, this dude was governor for 8 years in New Jersey, which is a pretty fucked up place. He was a prosecutor in a pretty fucked up place. He's clearly got some like weird fat man energy. Like he doesn't seem to get tired when he does these things, which is, you see DeSantis and he's just starting to flag the whole time. So I don't know. I mean, my basic impression on this is that like I think Trump is going to go to jail, or maybe not jail, but he's certainly going to be disqualified. And I think that basically, as this case kind of unwinds with Jack Smith, he's clearly got people in Trump's orbit who like worked for him who are going to testify against him. We're going to have, we're not going to have the visual of that because they like ban cameras or whatever, but we're going to have the reports of that. And I just don't see it. I don't see how Trump gets out of this one. I think the Alvin Bragg one was kind of an embarrassment. It was more about like what Alvin Bragg wanted to achieve, and it was like didn't quite work. But these documents, it's pretty bad. And like, what is this guy Walt gonna do? Waltina, whatever, Nolta or whatever his name is. Like, he's obviously gonna flip on Trump, right? Like, he doesn't really have a choice, right? So then you have the guy's valet going against him. I mean, he's just got a very weak hand going into the 2024 cycle. And I don't know. I don't know what we get. Like those of us who backed Trump in 2016, I don't know what we get with a Trump presidency 24 to 28. Like, what do we?
No, Charles. We don't get. We know the answer to this. We don't get anything. I mean, this
Yeah,
is.
and he won't
It's
even.
going to be
He
this
won't
like
even.
personal
But he
petty
won't even.
fascism.
But he won't
wins.
even. But he won't even win. Like, it's just weird. It's like I was having this conversation with one of my like super hardcore Trump fan, whatever, kind of like drank the Kool-Aid, waiting for the cyanide to kick in, friends, and we were just sitting there like chatting or whatever, and I was like, all right, so you believe the 2020 election was stolen, and like you have real doubts about the 2022 governor's race in Arizona, like why would they not steal it again against you? And like even under the logic of the MAGA people, like they don't really make sense. Like it doesn't like hang together, like seriously. And then you realize like, oh, it's just a grift. It's not
I think it's
it's not
deeper.
real.
I think it's a complete death spiral.
Oh,
Notion. Yeah, but
you
yeah, you're obviously right. It's like
you think it you think it's
totally
so
incoherent.
is it like a Jamestown kind of thing? Like what do you think it's like
Yeah,
the final?
yeah. I mean, you got the metaphor correct. Yeah,
Yeah.
they're demented. They're demented people, and they're gonna do. They're gonna pull some shit. I mean, I don't know if they're gonna pull some shit on Tuesday when he's arraigned. But I mean, there is nothing there. There's no policy. There's no objective. It's just like pure retribution. I mean, Christie got at this. He was like, he's going to be your vengeance or retribution or punishment or something. And he's like, well, I don't want that. Most Americans don't want that. And he's speaking to the middle and he's speaking for himself. But a lot of these people do want that. And they will, I mean, this is what J6 was about. This is what other things. Like they are demented people who want to hurt other people. I mean, I don't know what to really say. And like this is not going to end. I do think, I mean, it's a total like swing for the fences or like last ditch haymaker while you're falling to the mat. I mean, it's a total long shot. But I don't think it's out of the question that Donald Trump makes this like existential plea in 2024 and basically says there is no, I mean, he's already said this in effect. There is nothing after this election. Like they hate you. We're all going to be dead. I'm going to be in jail. I'm already in jail right now while I'm sending you this missive. And just vote for me and we'll win and we'll just destroy all these people who tormented us. And I mean, in 99% chance that will not work and Biden will beat him again. But there's this like 1% chance that like this like last minute haymaker is going to actually land. And we're going to have this. I know it's like it's almost like the leftist critique of fascism. It will be like authoritarianism for no reason. Like it's going to be like this petty personal dictatorship of feuds
Yeah, I
going
don't know.
after like
People,
media figures.
when people
It's like,
always
I mean, it's going to
describe
be a
when they
total
always
disaster if entertaining.
when they always describe him as like a fascist, it's like no.
Alex Jones is already. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
just
yeah.
not. It's not real.
I
Like the
mean, he kind
fascism.
of is in. He's a fascist in the way that like the soup Nazi from Seinfeld was a Nazi. You know, it's not even like I think I said the leftist critique. It's not the like Trotskyist critique of
No.
fascism.
There's no ideas behind
It's
Trump.
it's what like a lower school principal means when they say fascism. You know what I mean? And nothing against lower school principals. You just understand what I mean. It's like a
Yeah.
purely
No.
personal, like it just basically means like you're a meanie. But
I mean,
Trump in office
I think
would be
DeSantis
that.
though.
Like he would like execute Anderson Cooper or
I
something.
think
Like it would just
DeSantis.
be a
I
disaster.
He would be like the principal in the Breakfast Club.
yes.
Yeah, and all
Yes.
right, exactly. And all these like former administrative officials who'd be like, Bill Barr has tormented us long enough. It's like he was in your administration till like the last week or whatever when you pushed him out. He's like, we will throw this man off of the top of Trump Tower. He'll land with a splat. Like it's I mean, I'm joking here. I'm obviously being outrageous, but like I don't actually think I'm being that outrageous. Like he would, like if he's put up against the wall, that's when you really find out who someone is, you know, and that's who he is. It's we would see this like petty, insane, violent vengeance that I don't think this country is really ready for.
No, it's just not going to happen, right? I mean, the real
99% chance it's not going to happen.
the real
But
fascist in the race is DeSantis. Like that is like an actual.
There's that vibe though. Like
wow.
somebody sent me this. It was what Alex Jones said on his show this weekend, which is he told his audience that they needed to financially support him, or else you're going to get fucked in the ass by the deep state and the chat comms. So that's
Well, for
the
many
the
of them,
message that's
for,
kind of
for
going out
many
in
of
those
them,
circles. So I'm sure
for,
Trump would be close to something like that.
yeah, for many of them though, that's foreplay, right? Getting fucked in the ass by the Chi Coms. And speaking of which, did you guys see that the YouTube is now basically taking out the Daily Wire? Did you guys see this? This is like a very interesting development for those of us who've been talking about the Daily Wire basically being a front for the Chinese and
Nope.
the Israelis.
Yeah, I've seen that. Well, what's up with that? They're just because I know Ben Shapiro. Didn't he have a connection with the CEO? So what's happening? Are they having some issues back at home?
Well, the former CEO of YouTube is no more. She's gone. She's left the company. So clearly they are cleaning up a lot of the compromised bits of YouTube, and they're like actually applying a lot of these policies. And I love that it's over the trans issue, right? It's like they're making it about the trans issue rather than about how messed up this whole operation is. I don't know. It's a very interesting period. What's your sense? I see Tom just fell down. Welcome, Polly, by the way. Um,
Hello.
did you watch the Chris Christie thing by chance?
I've been trying to watch clips of it. Apparently, I don't get CNN on Fubo.
Oh,
So
Tom, do you have the real one? The real the
Yeah.
one you sent
Yeah,
me?
I'll
Let's
put it up
throw
in the
that shit up in the
jumbotron.
jumbotron. Yeah, throw that shit up there. I think that'll be quite interesting for people to watch it in its entirety.
I did see that he about the Russian collusion thing, that he said something about no, he doesn't think that there was Russian collusion, anything like that, but that he understood why there was an investigation into that. I'm wondering what you think of that.
I don't think they had a choice but to investigate the Russia collusion claims. He did talk about how Sessions was a little bitch for recusing himself, which I think is also true. So I don't know. In general, in the main, I thought Christie handled it correctly, and I think he's right that like Hillary Clinton should have been prosecuted. over her conduct in the 2016 race and her time as Secretary of State.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it's kind of like, I don't know. I don't think we want to get into the business of prosecuting former officials of other governments. Like, I don't think that that's a good idea. Like with Trump, it's pretty egregious. Like, and even then, like, you sometimes wonder if like it it sometimes seems to me like with Trump generally, there should just be um, there should basically just be uh, all right, we're not going to prosecute you, but you need to like shut the fuck up and hang out in Mar-a-Lago. And I think he'd rather go to jail, honestly, than like shutting the fuck up and hanging out in Mar-a-Lago.
He would have taken that deal 10 years ago. I think he's on a new level now. I mean, there's no stopping him. The only thing to do would be to kill him, really. I mean, there's just no stopping. He will absolutely run for president while in jail.
Yeah, in the olden times, he would have been killed, right? He would have drowned in his swimming pool or something, or he would have like choked on a Diet Coke or something.
Yeah, but why? But he's there's no like he wouldn't win anyways.
No, it's not about him winning. It's about all of us suffering. That's the point of it.
He thinks his supporters are going to go to any lengths to protect him. Like, I think a lot of his thinking now is that, it's almost like that. Well, if I can't, nobody can.
A lot of people have floated this idea of he just goes away and the prosecution goes away. I don't think either side will do that. I mean, if Trump were smart, he would just basically, say, I'm just going to go hang out in Mar-a-Lago and host dinner parties, and Kid Rock will play on Sunday evenings and all that kind of stuff. But he's not. He's in this. He's maniacal at this point. I also don't think Jack Smith would do this because this document things. I mean, granted, it's kind of a process crime, and I kind of get the idea that this is sort of like throwing Al Capone in jail for tax evasion or something. Like I kind of, just to be overly fair, I kind of get it. But it's actually extremely serious. I mean, one of the funnier things that Christie said that on the clips that I saw is he was like he flew his boxes from Florida from Mar-a-Lago to Bedminster, New Jersey. And he's like, what are these boxes? Like a family member? Like, why are you doing this? And Christie kind of let him off the hook when he said basically, I think he's obsessed with this stuff and he's petty and all that kind of thing. But I don't know. Like, I actually think that it's not a 1% chance. Maybe it's not a 99% chance. There's like a 50% chance that we're dealing with some like really serious shit. And that there is a direct connection between the LIV Gulf shit and these documents, nuclear codes, etc., and basically Trump kind of and Kushner selling out to the Saudis. I mean, in other words, there's kind of a coin flip in my mind of whether this is just
a coin flip at all.
Richard. Okay, I'm being fair here then.
No, stop being fair. Be honest. Like, we don't need any fairness.
I am being honest. I'm not positive. See, I could.
No.
I wrote this in my article where I was like, maybe this is geopolitical, or maybe this is just like a demented boomer.
No. Here's what happened, okay? He grabs all the classified documents. He throws them into these boxes because he's a pack rat, okay? This motherfucker doesn't read, okay? Like, let's just be real here. But he knows that he's got something of value that interests a whole lot of other countries. So what he does is he has them come to Mar-a-Lago and chill out or whatever. They go into the bathroom, okay? And they see all these boxes. By the way, he's like moving the boxes around. Like, his attorney is like, yo, we need to like turn over these boxes. And he's like, nah, we're not going to turn them over. And they're basically moving the boxes around. Like, it's like a 3-card Monte game within Mar-a-Lago. And his attorney is like, yo, I might go to jail over this. Like, I don't want to deal with that. Like, they'll reach he'll make me an accessory in the crime. So his attorney is basically like Linda tripping him the whole time, which, like, if your attorney is recording you, right, while they're being your attorney, like, you fucked up. Okay. Like, you are in serious trouble in that kind of situation. And meanwhile, he's like having people over, like Kid Rock, who's got all these weird Israeli connections, which I think Tom knows about with the New York Mag thing. Maybe throw that up in the Jumbotron too, Tom. I think I put it in our chat.
Yeah,
But
that's a good one.
yeah, so there's like all this weird shit with Kid Rock and like the Israelis, and you're like, is Kid Rock really like a rocker, or like what is going on here with Kid Rock? But whatever. So he's got all these people like showing up at Mar-a-Lago, and he's basically like, I've got these boxes. They're my boxes. They're beautiful. And he's trotting these people in, and he's like showing them the boxes, showing them the content in the boxes, whatever. And they read them, right? Not Trump, okay? And what the Saudis do is the Saudis conclude rightly that they can just buy Trump, and the way to buy him is through the golf course deal, because this is like how they money launder, and like they're obsessed with golf courses because they're Arabs and basically live in the desert, and so they want all this influence in the world of sport. During the Trump years, they wanted to buy an NBA team because, like, of course they did, and this is what's going on here. And let's not forget that like the Saudis have really close relationships with the Chinese all of a sudden. And China is, of course, brokering peace deals between Saudi Arabia and Iran. So, like, let's say they get all of our nuclear secrets, fine, whatever. They will then give that stuff to China or to other people to kind of sweeten whatever deals they might have, right? Because when you're in the espionage game, you just want the secrets so you can trade it for something else, right? And do I believe that Donald Trump, who, along with Kushner, has gotten like billions of dollars from these Arabs, do I think that Donald Trump is just going to like not sell whatever he has to get positional advantage? Of course not. And like you look over the years since Trump left, and like in those boxes were the names of a lot of our classified, CIA operatives, our sources, or whatever. And like he basically allowed people to read these things, any Tom, Dick, or Harry that like flattered him or was friendly to him, and we're just supposed to believe like the neocon Zionist, Maggie Haberman, basically there's a whole lot of people basically pretending that Trump is it's just about his ego, it's just about this. No, like this guy loves to sell shit, he loves to have advantage, he loves to weaponize information. He's done it throughout his entire career. Why would he not do it with these secrets? And then of course you have the Mark Meadows thing, and Mark Meadows is like clearly a fraudster. The one and only time I ever met with him, he was like definitely a crook. He has never lived in his district, right, in North Carolina. There's all kinds of allegations, pretty credible, that he was a go-between with the cartels and the Trump administration. So there's like all these relationships that he has where like there's a bunch of cartel people that are like, oh, I can get a message through to Trump through Mark Meadows. So clearly, Mark Meadows is like a deeply fucked up guy who was a real estate guy before he was in politics. And so, yeah, I mean, I think that what we're dealing with here is we're dealing with an extreme narcissist with clear ties to foreign governments who want to basically buy a former president. And basically, he has every incentive to keep going so that he can continue getting paid by these foreign governments. That's where we are right now.
Yeah, look, you are probably right. I mean, this obviously needs to be proven, and I hope that if what you're saying is true, and I am
It will
inclined to believe it.
never be proven because the U.S. government. The problem with espionage cases is that they can't go and talk about whatever secrets he tried to sell, and he
because
knows
it
that
would be such a disaster. Yeah,
because it would
that's
be a
interesting.
disaster. So what they'll
Yeah.
do is they'll basically put him in all these binds, right? where they'll give you like 10% of the story. And what will end up happening is he'll use the fact that they can't hit him with everything, because to hit him with everything, it would be to reveal those secrets. So he's essentially in a situation where he's graymailing the US government, where he's basically saying, like, I know all this shit. You can't really come after me because I will just talk about all this shit. But the librarians of the National Archives are like, no, you're going to give us back all the fucking documents. So that's what's really going on here. And, in terms of like showing people documents, whatever, he is basically harming our country by selling these secrets, or trying to advantage himself professionally, financially, what have you. And people know that this is what was happening. Like, he goes and he gives a key to the White House to Haritano Subduccio, who's this Indonesian oligarch who's widely thought to be a Chinese spy. And he gives him a key to the White House on the anniversary of January 6th. Okay? Like, this is who this guy is. And we need to, like, actually consider the possibility that he is actually, like, dangerous for our country. And I say this as somebody who supported him in 2016. I donated to him in 2020, but didn't vote in 2020 because I was, like, busy with shit, and I think voting's a waste of time. But, like, it doesn't sit well with me that, like, in his post-presidency, he's, like, having whoever the fuck down to Mar-a-Lago. They're, like, having some overpriced drinks and hanging out, and he's, like, showing them, the nuke codes. Like, are you kidding me? Like, it's ridiculous. And we need to be honest to the fact that, like, we might actually have, like, a real traitor ex-president. Like, that is a possibility. And I don't think it's a remote one. Because, like, I've dealt with the Justice Department over the years, both as a vendor and, like, they've come after me on various weird things in my life. And fortunately, it all got settled out. But they don't do anything unless they really fucking have you, okay? And they really don't do anything unless they really have you if you are, like, a president or, like, a politician or whatever. So they've got him, like, 10, 15 different ways. So the question right now is, like, how is this all going to go down? And I think what's going to happen is he's going to strap himself to the plane and drive everyone into the cliff with him, all of his supporters and everybody. I think that's what he's going to do. And I think the Israelis and other players who fear prosecution for their own crimes are going to, like, do a lot of crazy. There's going to be school shootings. There's going to be bombings. There's going to be blowing up of things on the freeway, whatever, right? Because
9/11.
they need, what's that?
9/11.
Yeah, they need this shit because they can't live in a world in which their criminal networks are uprooted. Now, I think the Israelis have decided to bury Trump, which is what all the Israelis coming over and talking to Biden were about. So obviously you're seeing a lot of the Israeli assets in the media kind of turn on Trump. Like, you saw Dershowitz publicly say that Trump is done. You've seen a number of different people basically saying that Trump is done. And I think that that's basically where we are, is that Trump is done. Now, my read on it more or less is who goes down with him now is the more interesting question. So just as you were saying earlier, like, one of the charges is conspiracy. Well, like, he's clearly not conspiring all that much with his valet. He's clearly conspiring with a bunch of people about all kinds of weird shit that he was doing in his post-presidency. So, like, who are all those people? And I think you're right. He is going to, like, get indicted over the January 6th stuff. Like, it seems pretty clear to me that they kind of have to get him on that too, because that gets to his conduct during his presidency. But I don't know. I mean, my read more or less, I've read the indictment now twice, okay? And I've talked to a bunch of Fed prosecutors that I know, including some that supported him, including some that didn't support him. And they're basically like, Charles, listen, this is like a slam dunk case. This is not like a bullshit whatever. Like, they got him. Like, he's done. And I trust the judgment of those prosecutors, So I don't know. I've been trying to get one of my former Fed prosecutor friends to come in one of these spaces, but he's like, he kind of is like, I don't really want to get a reputation for talking about this stuff out of school. So I don't know. I'll ask, but anyway, that's kind of my read on it. Excuse me, for lack of a better phrase. And I think Trump is fucked. Like, he just is fucked. So if Trump is fucked, right? Let's say that Trump is disqualified somehow. Well, like, all right, who do we have next up? Like, we have Ron DeSantis. Does anyone here honestly believe that Ron DeSantis is going to be the nominee of the Republican Party when he's so fucking weird that, like, I mean, does anyone really believe that he's going to win a national campaign? It's hard to imagine.
I think DeSantis is like over, actually.
Yeah,
Entirely.
I think his campaign ended when he did the Twitter space.
Yeah, I think it did, but it was ending even before that. You don't like come back from this level of everyone hates your guts and you make everyone's skin crawl. Like I think he's done. I don't think he has a career after this. It's over.
It seems like he's a little bit too much trying to act, like a different type of person, coming off as a retard, which is just not attractive as a whole. So that, yeah, I mean, that's just not something people would vote for.
No.
I think the Christie frame up of DeSantis is, I mean, you know that Christie's just going to demolish him,
Yeah.
like he did Rubio.
Yeah, and he's like a poor man's Rubio, and Rubio's weak.
Yeah.
Like when you compare like the rhetoric and the way that they carry themselves, Marco Rubio's total, he sucks, but Ron DeSantis is that much worse.
Rubio was having severe cope last week. When Christie announced he was running, he made out a special tweet that he was actually, in fact, not demolished in the debate 7 years ago, as a matter of fact. So that was quite hilarious.
Oh, just roll the tape, brother. Let's watch it.
Yeah. It was like, okay, dude. Like,
did
bro.
Rubio like win like the Puerto Rican delegate or something like a month after that debate, and so he's claiming that.
Yeah, he got our most treasonous places of Puerto Rico, Minnesota, and D.C.
Hey.
Hey, you know I'm right, Polly.
No, Minnesota's not that treasonous now.
She can't say anything about this.
He did win.
Blink twice. Blink twice if you're under occupation, Polly.
What do you guys think's going to happen?
I think I could even see DeSantis because he's flailing around. Like they're talking about renaming, going back to the Confederate general, military bases and things like that. And I mean, he's flailing around. I could even see him flail around and like try to go after Trump now. And it's just going to be, it's just going to like, you can't just Me Too, like in the old version of the phrase Me Too, you can't just Me Too all the time. It becomes annoying and you're inauthentic and no one believes anything about you. You can't just totally flip on this. DeSantis had to go after Trump very early and he didn't. Now that lane is entirely filled with the enormous girth of Chris Christie. Like you cannot get in there now. And so he's just in this weird lane of like,
I watched
Mike Pence, like, now granted, the man tried to have me killed in a completely barbaric fashion by his rabid supporters. But it was my running mate. And, I don't think we should prosecute this man. It's just like the most insanely cucky attitude.
If I put on my leather jacket, it'll definitely work.
I mean, the Dave Chappelle thing about Mike Pence being a mean, pray the gay away homosexual is basically like 100% right. Like, if you ever watch that clip of him talking about, Tom, see if you can find that and put that up on the Jumbotron of Dave Chappelle. I think I linked to it in one of my pieces about Chappelle talking about Mike Pence being one of those like sad gays, And I think it's basically correct. Yeah, I mean, look, I don't really believe that there is a future for Donald Trump or for Mike Pence in the Republican Party. I just don't see it. Like, the only way the Republican Party survives, in my view, is if it starts winning the suburbs. And I think there's basically only one dude who can do that, which is Christie. I don't particularly
Mm-hmm.
like that it's Christie, right? Like, I wish that some of them would like wake the fuck up and like not try to compete for like a smaller and smaller share of the electorate, simply because I think it would be better for the country to have all these things contested, right? I think it would be good to have like Joe Biden forced to make certain arguments publicly or to explain himself more. I think all that would be good, but like we're not in that kind of environment, basically. I thought Christie's thing today too was also like weirdly Christian. I don't know if anyone else had that feeling too. Like, for those of us who watched it, like he talks about his Catholic faith, and but he's also like very practical on the abortion issue. He's like, listen, like we're gonna figure this out state by state, and then we're gonna figure out like where we are as a country on this issue, which I think is basically correct. Like, I don't think the Constitution like gives the federal government the power to outlaw abortion. Like just as it doesn't, just as the Constitution doesn't have like a secret right to choose in it, I think the same thing
Mm-hmm.
is true. I mean, I would like it to be more pro-abortion, rights. You know what I mean? Like, I think actually, I think we should just be a normal country like the UK or Australia or whatever, and allow abortion in the first trimester and then not afterwards. Like, I don't see why that's such a hard thing. Like, why can't we harmonize with the rest of the world? But we're in a world in which, like, yeah, if you're in New Jersey or in California or whatever, you can get an abortion like basically up until birth. Like, that seems pretty fucked up to like most normal people. So I think when Christie was basically like fighting this out tonight, I think he did pretty well on it. And when he's talking about drug addiction and like healing people who have drug addiction issues, I think he was actually like striking a pretty good note, you know? I don't know. So anyway, that's my frame on it. I also think Christie's funnier now, by the way, than he was the last time around. He seemed meaner. He seems kind of like chilled out at age 60 versus like whatever it was 7 years ago, 8 years ago when he was running for president last time. Did anyone else get that vibe? Like watching it tonight, he seemed like kind of like it was like he was giving like kind of like a professor lecturing a class.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he had a humor about him that was really, I really
Yeah,
enjoyed.
it was weird. Like I didn't remember this Christie, and I watched some of the clips from like a few years, and he seemed like kind of a dick, like maybe like 8 years ago or whatever it was, 2015, 2016. But he was just kind of like way chiller. It was weird. It was a weird thing to see. He seemed like both comfortable and chilled out while he was doing this stuff. But I don't know.
That'll help him though.
You think so? What did you think? Like, what did you think? Do you think he's going to do well in the Midwest? Like, people who are from the Midwest, what's your read on this? Because I don't think he's going to do well in the South. I think that's still Trump territory, mostly. I think that will fall, but it'll be the last to fall.
I think in the Midwest he can, Trump.
Yeah, I mean the South loves lost causes and like suicidal
I literally
campaigns.
never
I
thought
mean,
I would see a former vice president of the United States make a case for a Confederate general being like named after our military bases.
look, all of that was about the great reconciliation that occurred post Civil War, and it was ultimately a good thing. It was basically we're not going to totally annihilate our adversaries. We're going to respect you for your valor and the good things. We're not going to talk about the real causes of the war, etc. It was a kind of noble compromise.
Yeah, I understand
it just
all of
doesn't
that, right? Like,
work anymore.
Obviously, like, my ancestors were heavily involved in the Civil War, were decorated in the Civil War. One of my ancestors was a Jayhawk who would like hunt down Confederates just like hanging out in Kansas. They would like kill them when they were like at church and stuff, like really grisly stuff. And obviously, like, lots of people have a what can I say about this? There's a lot of people who wanted basically the Civil War to end and to move along. But the deal was that the official state religion was that the Union won and deserved to win, and that we would basically like not rip down the Confederate statues, and we would basically let them honor their dead or whatever. But we would basically like not fuck with them if they didn't fuck with us.
Exactly, and
But
that was the
increasingly,
arrangement. I mean, the
yeah,
Confederate
increasingly
statues
they're
were
fucking with
later. I mean,
us.
I
Yeah,
think there's bitterness.
yeah, I mean,
Stuff
look,
that
the overwhelming reason for taking down the statues was like wokeness and
yeah.
whatever. The new kind of
yeah,
racial
but like,
arrangement in the country.
but like,
It wasn't because it's like actually we're all Yankees or something. I mean, that wasn't the impulse.
no, but like, I
Yeah.
don't believe, like, first of all, I think the real reason this conflict is happening is because we've diversified as a country. So you have like weird Italians like Ron DeSantis, whose family wasn't even in the country when the Civil War was going on. Suddenly
Mhm.
they're like all about muck Confederacy and must states' rights and all this. And it's
Oh
like,
yeah,
you have no
because
claim
it's
to
all
this,
become a
sir.
culture war issue. Like it's not even like the fact that the South is in love with Trump and Ron DeSantis is a Confederate, nostalgic. It's all gotten mixed up. It's
Yeah,
just this
but my point,
weird
my point is that like
culture war hot
pe-
button.
people who are new Americans, right, who like don't have blood, that like fought and died and suffered in the Civil War, like they should maybe like shut the fuck up about it. Like they're not welcome in the debate, in my view.
Yeah, well, that's fine to say, but like that's not how this is going to work. I mean, I'm sure there are like now Hispanics that are super pro Confederate monument or something because it's
No,
all
my
it's
theory
all been
about
like
my
ripped
no,
out
no,
of
my
its
my theory about it
actual.
is that the Italians are very worried that if like all the Confederates fall, they're going to lose Columbus, right?
That's already happened.
So exactly, like my point about this is like there's a lot of like disingenuous nonsense where like Nikki Haley had no business taking down the Stars and Bars in South Carolina. Like that was not her call to make.
Hmm.
Um, and there's a certain level of like maintaining Southern pride that should be done just as like good measure, good neighborly working order. But increasingly, when they're like flying the Stars and Bars in Israel, right, during their pro Netanyahu protests, or when they are like making these homages to, calling for a national divorce, which is a Marjorie Taylor Greene talking point. Like, fuck these people. Like, they're not. They need to be humiliated again, and they need to be reminded of like who won the war. And this is kind of like, I mean, again, we have a vice president from Indiana who is an Irishman, right? Like his family, again, like wasn't in the country when the Civil War was going on, and he's talking about bringing back Fort Bragg, and it's like, no, fuck you. Like, you have no business in this. I don't know. It's maddening to me that like these people are even allowed to have like we would not tolerate somebody who is an immigrant coming like 10 minutes ago lecturing us on like the Civil War. It's absurd. And like we have this guy Vivek Ramaswamy or whatever his name is, like lecturing us about affirmative action, and it's like, bro, you showed up 10 minutes ago. Like you don't get a say in these things.
Yeah, but yeah, Charles, listen, I resonate with what you're saying, but like it's you're just like bloviating here. I mean, welcome to the United States of America.
I don't know.
Like,
I think that we who are legacy Americans shouldn't just like give up this territory.
well,
You
I
know.
get it, but like
Agreed.
there's something fundamentally wrong in the way this country was conceived that this is even possible. And it is possible and it's already happened. And so like I don't know. I mean, there's this weird like kind of the kind of WASP like nostalgia or racialism in the United States, like at some point you need to reach the conclusion that this country is antithetical to what you want.
Oh, so I don't agree with that at all. Like, I think when Ben Shapiro starts making claims about, like, which flag people fought for in World War II when his family was, like, in Europe, we should be reminding them of their place in the debate. And I don't
You can
agree that,
say
like,
that, but Ben Shapiro is ultimately part of a multi-billion-dollar organization
yeah, but that can be
that
but that can be
unfortunately
taken from him.
inflects the minds of white Americans more than we do.
Yes, and that can and should be taken from him.
I totally endorse it, but like, needless to say, I endorse that. But like, we've just got to we've got to like get back in reality and not just like
No, I
get
don't.
on our high
I don't
horses.
think we're getting on our high horse. I think we're making a very, like, when Ben Shapiro lectures those of us who have family that, like, were decorated in World War II while his family was in Europe. Like, when he pretends to speak for America, we should be reminding him that, like, he doesn't get a claim in this conversation. It would be like a white person telling a black person about slavery. It's like, no, like, you don't get, like, if you don't have any connection to that history,
Well,
like,
many white people do have a connection to slavery, and
well,
they know quite a bit about it. But
yeah.
I understand your
Do you
point.
know what I'm saying? Like, there's a certain level of, like, actually, like, there are heritage Americans or legacy Americans,
Well,
and,
I
like,
know, but this country, like, do you not grasp that there is something like fundamentally problematic about the very conception of the United States?
yeah.
And
So this is
it's
where you and
actually
I part
it's
ways on a
been one
lot
of
of
the
this stuff.
great things. It actually has allowed it to succeed in many ways. I am fair. I'm not just some like anti-American like reactionary. It's allowed it to succeed, but it also will kind of probably ultimately bring it down.
Oh, so I don't agree with this. I think that what is saving the United States right now are WASP Americans like, um,
That very well might be the
Sheldon
case.
Whitehouse, or people who have connection. I mean, people who have
That might be
connections.
the case, but like there is an internal program within the United States that is going to like displace those people on behalf of Vivek Ramaswamy.
Yeah, I don't agree with that. I think that
I
I think
well,
I think that there's a vision that there's a lie that basically a lot of people have that we're a nation of immigrants, and I don't believe that for a second. I think that the scene from The Good Shepherd, where it's like, what do you people have?
right.
The United States of America, and the rest of you all are just visiting. Like, I think that that is true. Um, and it certainly comports with my understanding of how, like, the world really works. Like, when it really comes down to it, what people want from the heritage Americans and legacy Americans is leadership. And for many years, like, our WASP classes have, like, hung out with their second or third wives, drinking their third or fourth martinis at the country club. But, like, we saw what that got us, right? That got us the presidency of Donald Trump and really of Jared Kushner. And it got us a kind of looting of the treasury, and it got us, like, where we are now. And so I think what's happening is that, just as in all moments of crisis, like, there are people who are rising up and coming back and basically, like, making it clear who's in charge and who's not in this country. And, one of the great, I mean, Joe Biden is one such person, right? Like, the No Malarkey tour, like, couldn't. I mean, was there ever a more waspish sentiment than that? I mean, he LARPs as an Irishman, but we all kind of know that he's very British to the core. Um, so yeah, I mean, I honestly think that, like, we've kind of allowed the multi-culti, anything goes, whatever kind of thing to go on. But, like, it's time to be serious about, like, who's in charge of
Yeah,
this
yeah,
country.
Charles. I mean, I hate to sound like a conservative here, but like there was a gay pride Dionysian like mystery cult festival on the White House lawn this past weekend, just as a
Yeah.
reminder about how
And
serious these people are.
who cares?
Well, I kind of agree with you. In a way, I don't care because I'm so like over it. But like, let's just not pretend that these are ultimately serious people. They're like ultimately able to rule this stuff.
No,
I
I
mean,
mean
I just
let the queers fly their rainbow flag. Who cares?
well, I get that, but like there was something shockingly official about it all that I think a lot of people were reacting to, and I really understand them in a way. I mean, again, I don't dwell on any of this stuff because I'm just so over it and whatever, but like it's a real thing. And I don't like I guess I'm just ultimately much more like I'm much more hostile towards very core ideas that have been around in America for a very long time. I'll just be honest, hostile towards the puritanical element that has been with the United States. I mean, I'm much more like open towards the cavalier, Washington Jefferson slave owning types, despite some of their rhetoric.
Isn't
But
that's your stock too, right? Didn't your family come through
right, but
Virginia?
yes, sort of. But I'm very hostile towards like a lot of elements in this country, and like our fundamental like soft power state ideology ultimately is like globo homo. I mean, let's just be
Yep.
honest
The
here.
question is like, what is wrong with globo homo?
A lot.
Well, I mean, people always say this, right? But like, I look at a world in which we had all these closeted queers being blackmailed, like,
No, I get this. Charles, that I
let them out of
actually
the closet, let
agree.
them dance around,
I
like,
kind
who
of
cares?
agree with this like contrarian hot take, to be honest. But like you're trying to like
Do
put
you think
that.
Joe Biden respects Pete Buttigieg?
Probably not.
Yeah, not no probably about it. Okay,
Okay,
like, do you think that anyone sees him as anything other than a joke, right? And the
but
same
why
goes
is
for
he there? I mean,
Joe Biden is an emperor, and an emperor has people that pay him tribute. So all of the
why do
gays,
you want tribute paid by some
because
like
he had
Mormon,
because
gay
he had
Mormon from India?
well, because he had, I mean, he had all this money that came in through all the weird tech Jews that backed him and all the McKinsey weirdos.
Okay.
I mean, the same thing with like Joe Biden basically knows that Kamala Harris is a hoe, right? And he put her as his vice president to have her go shake down Silicon Valley for money for his campaign because he didn't want to go and deal with those people, right?
Okay.
So like, there's this view, like, all right, you give the homos like a parade on the lawn, right? Who cares? Let them parade around and like do their thing, and then they'll leave. And who will be sitting in the commander in chief chair, right? I mean, it doesn't matter. It's like one of these things where it's like, it's this symbolic bullshit of like, it's one thing if it's in school,
I get
right?
your perspective. Like I get that it is and I agree that it's symbolic bullshit. But sometimes the symbolic bullshit can kind of like seep into the point where you believe in the symbolic bullshit. I mean, I think that's been like the history of the
Do you
United
believe it?
States.
Do you believe it?
Of course I don't believe it,
Okay.
but like
Does anyone here really believe it? No.
but we're not representative.
Yeah, but it's like, look, it's like
Vast
there's
tons of Americans believe in this kind of like it's ultimately like what Christianity has become. It's like Jesus's covenant is like love one another, guy. Like
no.
this resonates
I
with
think there's a shitload of
cattle.
people. Like, I'll give you an example, right? So there was this woman I was seeing who was a nurse during the 2020 Black Lives Matter craziness. Okay,
Hmm.
and she's like, lily white chick, I think she's like Irish. I'm not totally sure. She's like indeterminate white race, right? And yeah, she was really fun. I'd have her over, whatever. We do those things that you do right after you get out of a divorce.
Indeterminate white race.
You know what I'm talking about, though.
Just,
She's like,
I do. It's
she's
just
like,
kind of
she's like some kind of white ethnic. You're not really sure. It's kind
Yeah.
of rude. You're not totally sure. Anyway, whatever. It doesn't matter. But the Black Lives Matter like riots started taking place, and we'll call her I don't know. We'll call her Courtney for the purposes of this thing. No, we'll call her Bethany. That's even better. So Bethany, posts this, Black Lives Matter sticker on her Instagram, and I see it, and I'm like, yo, what's up with this? What are you doing here? And I was like, do you actually believe this shit? And she goes, no, but my boss did it, and like some of my friends did it, so whatever, who cares? And
well,
that
but
is
this
like,
is kind of my point.
no, but that is how most Americans actually are. They are, okay, whatever. You need me to like wear the flag pin that's like of the queers? Yeah, sure,
I think a
whatever.
lot of Americans really believe in this goobly gobbly nonsense about like all people being equal and loving one another. I mean, this is again like I guess I'm getting real deep here, but a lot of people talk about this stuff as like a replacement religion or something. I mean, this is Christianity. Like this is what Christianity has always been about. And it's why like I'm dedicating my life to annihilating Abrahamic religions by
Well, good luck.
demoralizing them at their very core.
Good luck.
It's
Maybe you'll be
it's
the first.
I'm not the first to try, but like
I mean,
this
look,
will happen because this is like they're all
maybe,
going out. But like,
maybe.
let's just be frank about the fact that all of this goobly gobbly nonsense directly appeals to most people.
Nah.
It
I think
just
I think it's
does.
one of these faddish things in life that washes over you and you pretend to give a shit about. It's like having a pet rock or like whatever. It's not a big deal. And by the
Why
way,
is it so
like
dominant? It's not a big deal.
I
We're
want all
all
these
just
people.
lying about it.
I want
I
all
mean,
these
give me a
people out.
break. It's nonsense.
I want all the freaks out of the closet dancing around, and like I have no problem with that. Like so long as they're not like fucking with my kids, I don't care.
Yeah, I understand that hot take. I just think you're deluding yourself to believe that this isn't a hegemonic dominant ideology.
Yeah. I mean, I'd love to see some. I mean,
and that it is deeply rooted. It's Dionysian, and it's a bacchanal. What we saw this past weekend, it's a bacchanal. This is not something
even
new.
Even if
that
I
came
believe
on
that.
the scene with Joe Biden, Chuck. We have been dealing with Dionysianism for like 3,000 years at the very least.
Look,
it is something
always,
that has always been there, and you have to deal with it.
We've always had gays in our society. We've always had them do weird gay things. Okay. They used to do it in bath clubs where they'd all get HIV/AIDS and croak, right? Or many of them would like run for office, and that's why we had Barack Obama get elected, whatever. Like we all know this, that like the queers we shall always have among us. So
I get that. I'm
if they want to
realistic
parade around,
about like gays. I don't. That's not the issue.
well, what is the issue? Like if
the
the
issue
trannies,
is the dominant ideology of this country.
oh, I don't think so. I think this country has like 20 different ideologies, and that people put them on to put them on and turn
Well,
them
then
off.
what is this country then?
It's
like it's a WASP elitist place. Well, you could have fooled me.
No, I mean I think that there is a U.S. deep state that runs the empire for sure.
I agree.
And
but like, what's the point of the empire unless we're advancing civilization?
Well, I mean, the question is, I mean, I don't think we're not advancing civilization. I think we are advancing civilization in Ukraine and in all these, Latin American presidents that we're arraigning and bringing up on federal charges of corruption. I mean, we are the world's prosecutor now. And like, that is the reality of being the dominant and hegemonic player. And, when we have our president basically being arraigned tomorrow or whatever it is, we are sending a message to the whole world that like We don't go for corruption or selling our secrets. Like, we're not the world's bitch. And, whatever. If Joe Biden isn't there, like, doing keg stands with the queers dancing on the White House lawn, like, he doesn't give a fuck. He's too busy doing the real work. And I think that there's a lot of that where people get sucked into the politics of symbolism, and it doesn't really work. Like, nobody really cares all that much about it.
There are
It's
people
like,
who do care, though. I mean, to Richard's point, and I think that's part of it, is there's this forced diversity
Symbolism matters. I mean,
that
it just does. I don't think the U.S. empire is really long for this world because it can't put forward a coherent vision of why you need to be part of this thing. And I am
no,
impressed with
it's not
certain
making the
people.
argument. It's surviving the argument relative to the Russians and the Chinese. If not us, who is the dominant player? What,
That's fair enough.
the
I think that's
Europeans?
a
Like, come on. The
fair enough.
Brits? No, right? Like, we are the hegemonic player.
I'll actually grant you that. I agree with you. I will totally grant you that, like, there's no compelling vision.
There's no
in this,
alternative.
like, gooey capitalism, consumerism America is still the most popular thing, and it is legitimately better than, like, living in the Russian world, which is totally backward and drug infested, or
Yeah,
the Chinese world,
they
which is
pimp out their
horrifying
women.
prospect, or Islam, which
Yeah.
is even possibly worse. So I
Yeah.
get it. But
Yeah. So,
like,
aren't you,
I
like,
guess I'm
making
just
my point? Like, isn't the
totally
price of that?
dissatisfied.
No, but the price of, look,
Well,
we are
Charles,
always
look,
going to have.
Charles, look, don't get on my back. While you were donating to Donald Trump in 2020, I mean, goodness gracious.
Well,
I was out there making sure that, well, I didn't, I endorsed Joe Biden, and I made sure that, like, I don't know, the narrative about all this stuff was kind of skewed, including the narrative about me.
no,
I mean, I totally
in
got on board with this
2019,
shit.
a friend called me up and was like, yo, I'm raising money for Donald Trump. Would you give me the money? And I had the money and I wanted my friend to be happy, so I gave him the money. Do I give a fuck about Donald Trump? No, because Donald Trump is, again, another, child or grandchild of immigrants who, like, was just passing through. Like, the strength of America is that we could basically just have a bullshitter as president for 4 years, and, like, the country's more or less intact, right? Like, nobody, we haven't, like, lost any states along the way, right? And, like, life goes on, right? We have an 80-year-old man as president of the United States, and he's, like, actually doing a good job, which you and I would agree with.
Of course.
So, like, I think in many respects we had to go through the Trump presidency, like we had to go through the Obama presidency. And I do believe that the United States has a compelling mission in the world. I don't think it's just globo homo. Hilarious though globo homo is, frankly, like, watching everyone lose their shit over a rainbow flag, like, not a big deal. It just is what it is. I have nothing against a whole bunch of eunuchs out there cutting their dicks off and, like, asking me to call them she's, whatever. Who cares? Like, everybody knows that they're, like, fake, right? Everybody knows that this compulsory, like, weird, like, gender is a construct, but, race is essential. Like, everybody knows that this stuff is fake. Like, they know it. And if they're serious people, right? Like, let's be honest. Like, the serious people in our country are busy doing serious things, like running serious companies, raising serious money, building serious things. And, there's a whole bunch of malcontents in our society that have it so good because, we're a very rich country. So they can, like, try on their latte liberalism or their champagne socialism. And, like, most of us just don't give a fuck because we're too busy, like, raising our families, making money, building things that are interesting in the world and beautiful in the world. And, like, most
So,
people,
do you think that like, anyone engaging in any sort of philosophical endeavor. Like they're just not serious because they're not like a businessman or something.
No.
I mean,
I think you can
this is
engage
like
in.
the
No. I
ultimate
think you can engage in.
expression of
No,
like
no, no. I think you can
conservatives.
engage. No,
Why
no.
conservatives lose is because they are a bunch of like small business owners, and it's actually like being hegemonic at universities or art exhibits or all these things conservatives hate, like the
Oh,
theater,
I don't believe.
Hollywood.
I don't
This is
believe.
actually how you run the world.
Yeah, but I don't believe that America is a conservative country. Full stop. Like I think we are, we are a progressive, visionary nation when we're at our best, and so I don't like let the small business
It's a
people.
nation of goobers. I mean, let's
Maybe, but like we have an elite that's serious. I
we'll
mean,
see.
I mean, look at the scoreboard, right? Like, look at the companies that we built in this society. You know, just is what it
You're
is.
going back to companies again. Like,
No, I mean, I'm talking about like real business
I
empires.
ultimately
Like,
don't fucking care about Office Max.
no,
At the
nor
end of the day,
nor
and
should
the thing
you.
that is so much more powerful than all these powerful companies you're talking about in terms of the American empire has been Hollywood. And Hollywood is run by left-wing Jews or liberal Jews, let's say. And
I don't
they
know. I
have
mean,
been
I
so
don't.
much
I don't
more powerful in inflecting the imagination. I don't say this as some anti-Semite or as some as a criticism at all. They have been so much more powerful
no,
in
the most
spreading
powerful, the
American
most.
empire and inflecting the imaginations of billions of people on the planet than any like conservative businessman that you seem to admire.
Oh, I mean,
It's not even funny.
Henry Ford, Thomas Alva Edison. I mean, these are serious men. Like, and we're serious men. I mean, everybody
Henry Ford
uses.
is your example.
Yeah, of course. I mean, when Henry Ford was running the
Who
Ford
got
Motor Company.
destroyed by his ideological adversaries.
No, Henry Ford was destroyed because he got the shit kicked out of him by other car companies because he was basically not capable of adjusting, which happens to a lot of people who build empires. But at his heyday, Detroit was producing 50% of global GDP. Like that is serious power. And that was like one city in
Charles,
our country.
you do not grasp like the power of religion, myth, and imagination. And Hollywood is so much more powerful than Henry Ford. It's not even
No, our
fucking
tech
funny.
companies are way more powerful than Hollywood ever was.
No.
Like
No.
Google is a serious company. Okay, like
God.
if you just look at the sheer data that they have, and like let's be honest about this, like Hollywood is done now that Netflix and like Amazon Prime and all these other things have come up. Like if you don't think it, I mean, like look at them striking, right? They're not serious players in the world now. Like Hollywood hasn't produced a serious movie that was worth a damn
Stop
in
using
like.
the word serious. It's just
Well, like
like
name a
Charles.
film. Name a film in the last 10 years that had anywhere near the cultural impact of like, I don't know, a Gone with the Wind, a Titanic, I mean,
I get that. I actually wouldn't disagree that
so
Hollywood's
it's
kind
a
of in
waning
decline.
power.
So my point is twofold, which is that these myth makers are far more influential than anyone in Foggy Bottom or anyone in the tech industry. A.
I mean,
Secondly,
we're all
they have
talking on
been
Apple
far more.
phones right now, right? Like,
Yeah,
I
but the
mean,
Apple phone is just a medium for something. Like it's technology is a way of going from A to B. It doesn't
no, I
really
think the
tell you why you're
technology
doing that.
is a myth. It forms myth making way more than any Hollywood film ever did.
That's
The
ridiculous to
stories
say.
you tell yourself about like what kind of products you consume matters way more than like all this weird Hollywood. I mean, I just asked you like name a film in the last 10 years.
I've granted you that all of this stuff is in decline, and it's in decline alongside the American empire itself,
Oh, I
which
don't.
also can't come up with new myths about itself to sell the world's population and to like give people new ways to dream, as they said in Sunset Boulevard. Like you have that is power. that is how you dominate the planet. You don't just do it through like gay parades or little technocratic people in the State Department. You do it through capturing the imagination of billions of people. And Hollywood's dominance like coincided with American dominance, and they're kind of mutually indispensable, and they're mutually reinforcing. And the fact that we're losing that, I think, actually makes me very pessimistic about the future of the American empire. There's no
Yeah,
real
I think we
compelling
sold.
story. Like you can't just
I
go
think
be
we
a
sold a big chunk
prosecutor.
of ourselves to the Chinese because a bunch of people wanted to make money over the basically since 07, 08, since the crash, and people got the dreck, from Hollywood. They got increasingly shittier technology because of the relationship we had with China, and that relationship is breaking up. And as that relationship is breaking up, we're getting more interesting content. We're getting more interesting leaders all of a sudden who are showing up in different weird ways in our society. And like, we are in a situation where the nation of the Jews, right, who are big myth makers, the Israelis, are basically in disarray. They can't really do anything. The Chinese economy is imploding, like as we speak. Their marriage rate is at a
I don't disagree with necessarily most of
60-year
what you're
low.
saying.
So like
I don't
let's
disagree
count
with a
our
lot of what you just said.
blessings. Like let's count our blessings, right? We have a dominant country culturally, economically. And yeah, like is it as powerful as it was in 1950, 1960? Probably not in terms of like, it's just sheer power. But like we don't have to be like running around being the world's cop like we were in the Bush years or even like we kind of did during the Trump years. We can take a step back and get our allies to do a bunch of things like we've seen. I mean, look at how the UK is basically behaving post Brexit. Like they're begging us for the scraps off of our table. Um, you know, we are the most dominant power in the world, and I think we're likely to be it for quite some time. And you have to, if the
I don't
price of
fully
that,
disagree with that.
if the
I
price of
don't.
that is a bunch of like globo homo whatever, who cares? Like I mean, we've talked a lot. You and I've talked a lot about Elon Musk, right? And
Yes.
like Elon Musk is a myth, right, that was created, right? He is like obviously a con man. Anyone who has
Yeah.
eyes can see it. Everybody knows that he's going to end up in jail like Elizabeth Holmes if he isn't like killed in some weird elaborate way on one of his private jets. Because that's clearly like in the movie version, one of his planes goes down one day and nobody knows why and nobody investigates it, right? That's how it like happens in the cinematic version of events, right? But most likely he's going to get busted doing some fraudulent thing because that's like kind of what he does. And like he'll probably do like a little bit of jail time and he'll, eradicate billions of dollars of wealth and fine, whatever. But, this country produced an Elon Musk, which put real rockets and real electric cars on the road. Now it's all kind of fake on some level. And maybe America's itself like a playground, maybe it's a fantasy land, right? Maybe that's all true. But it's deeply compelling to lots and lots of people all around the world. And there has to be a reason for it besides our just like, consumerism. Because, you know, there's a clear reason that like Zelensky calls us, right? And it's because we have the weapons. So when you watch Lockheed Martin like dance around at a pride parade or whatever, like who cares? Like if the bombs have a rainbow flag, painted on them, it's sort of immaterial to the question of like where are the bombs going? Who are they killing? Right? Um, I don't think it matters much. So yeah, I think we're in a situation where you're kind of like doomer, you know, I mean, the doomer aspect of what you're describing. I mean, if you just look at what's happening on turning away from the fossil fuel industry, rolling back a lot of these foreign intelligence operations. I mean, things are happening at a very fast clip right now. You know, like we have leaders all around the world who are basically eating it, from Nicola Sturgeon to Boris Johnson to Donald Trump. I mean, things are happening and things are getting cleaned up at a very fast clip. You know, so I don't know, man. Like, look at the scoreboard. Like, we're out of Afghanistan and Iraq. We are we're effectively out of the Middle East for all intents and purposes. The Israelis, who basically had a stranglehold on all of one party and like 60% of the other party, are basically on their ass. Life is good in America now, like in the real America, not in like the bullshit fake California or in the bullshit fake, parts of our country. And it's working. Like the Biden agenda of a technical, I mean, the number of factories that are opening up, I mean, those are real things, right? Like, are they some compelling myth that people believe in or whatever? Who cares? Like, in the final analysis, there are people who are making money, living good lives, running their lives in a perfectly like middle class or upper middle class
Yeah,
way.
that's all you want, Charles.
No,
That's
all.
kind
That's
of
all.
my point.
That's all I expect. Because
Well,
it's not
I mean,
because the elite in our
there's
society.
just no reason why this country has to be this dumb.
Richard,
You know,
we don't want them being smart. Why would you want them being smart?
I'm not even talking about like most people. I'm like there's no excuse to have like these levels of civilization, and there's no excuse to allow like just this kind of ugliness to persist. I mean, like, we're better than this. Like, we don't have to have like strip mall goofball America. Like, we can
Yeah,
force
and
people
what did we
to
just
be
do?
higher.
Like we just raised interest rates, so like they're not building any more strip malls now, are they?
Well,
You know?
okay, you understand.
No, but you missed
what
my
I'm
point.
saying.
My point is like, yeah, there's a lot of ugly. Like we have a bunch of mobsters living in our country. Like surprise, like a whole lot of people who came over to this country from whatever shithole country they came from, like they weren't always the best people. Many of them were fleeing from the law. Okay. And they ran whole states in our country. I mean, South Carolina was a fucking prison colony. Okay. As was Georgia to some extent. And like, what do you think? Like those people just stopped criming? Like they just like they came here and they like hung out in Georgia. They like went to Sea Island and they were like, oh, I think we're all going to be like super. No, they're all criminals, right? Like we have a lot of low class criminal fucked up people in this country. Like absolutely, absolutely agreed. But it's not their job to like try to raise themselves up. It's our job as an elite to actually like lead and have a compelling vision and make arguments and like run the country. That's like our job. Okay. And that means basically making sure that like when the mobsters misbehave, we go in and we clean them out and like smack them around and get back to the business of like running the country and running the world. That is our duty as those of us who've had elite pedigrees and like this is real life. Like, we have obligations. And what happens a lot of the time is that those of us who are an elite, like we look at the people who are our charges and we look at them with contempt. We will always have like a servile class below us. This is always the way. Now we can raise up some of them, right? There is, because this is what it means to be a progressive in a small sense, but we are always going to have them among us. That is just the reality of everyday life. The problem is when we have a fake elite, like the Donald Trumps of the world, like the Ron DeSantises of the world, where we have a bunch of people who go and who have the trappings of elite education, going to Harvard or who cares, right, Stanford. And that is the problem that we face, is that we have a fake elite that pretends to actually govern us. And, they basically exploit us. That is where we really are right now. And What needs to happen is those of us who are elite need to just assume the position and take back the country in different ways. And that's already happening in all kinds of real serious ways. A high interest rate makes it so that the mobster and his cousin can't go and rape our environment by putting up a strip mall, right? Because they can't get the money to support it from a bank. Okay, a serious tax policy that relocates to building real factories and to moving away from the oil industry. That is real life. Like that is happening as we speak. Like look around at what the Department of Energy is doing. It's real. It's happening. The Chips Act, we're no longer. I mean, there's so many things I could point to of like a real compelling vision of where the country is going and how much it's going to be transformed over the course of the next 5, 10, 20 years. We don't need everyone like be getting a liberal arts education, right? I would just be happy if many of the people aren't on fentanyl.
You're just misstating. I mean, do you honestly think I'm some kind of egalitarian? I mean, like, what are you talking about? You obviously don't think that's what I believe. That's not what I'm
No, I
talking
don't. I
about.
don't think that that's what you believe. But I think that your argument that like the country is low, it's like, okay, and then what, right? Like it's seeming to work, and it's moving in the right direction on a whole host of issues. I mean, be honest. Like, did you ever think that they would ever actually come for Trump in a serious way?
We'll end it here. I think we both said our piece on this one.
All right, let's go to Patrick and Adam then.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Can you hear me okay? I wasn't sure.
Yeah, I can hear you all right. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to talk about the Christie Republican thing, but you brought up a pretty interesting subject with the debt ceiling and the longevity of our country as like a world leader. And I think like if there's anyone who would take us over like in time or would take over in time, it would be China. And like I guess like our threat at this point would be Israel. But like I think like one of the moral hazards of like capitalism, without protectionism or like with this this whole free market idea would be like this threat of like exporting manufacturing for like short-term profit at the cost of like knowledge, labor, skill, like dependence, like in the long run for like short-term gains.
Well, you saw Christie tonight on China, right, where he was like, "We're tired of being chumps in how we deal with the Chinese," and I put up in the jumbotron like, China's in serious trouble right now. Like if you just look at their numbers, like population is falling for the first time in 60 years. Birth rate is at a record low. I mean, they have basically raped and polluted their environment. They are not, I mean, if you can't see the sky in your country, you are not the future world leader. Like, I'm sorry, like, nobody wants to live in China, least of all the Chinese. Nobody wants to bring children into the world in China because it's fucking terrible to live there.
Yeah,
and
that's
like,
interesting. That's interesting. I was just thinking like,
I mean, have any of you gone to like been to China, like and eaten food? I mean, even the high end restaurants suck. The whole place sucks. Like the women aren't attractive. The food isn't good. The air isn't breathable. Like, what is the vision that they offer? Like, they have a bunch of slaves. Okay, like, great. Like, that's not where we're going, right? Like, I don't know. It's just kind of like there's a level. I mean, China is food insecure. Like, there's no vision that involves the Chinese dominating us, other than them just stealing everything we come up with. Like,
and that's what I was afraid of, like their navy, like the expansion of their navy over time. But I
yeah,
think
all
you're
right. So they have a navy, right? We have a satellite infrastructure. Like, we have several orders of magnitude more shit in space than they do, and we can just target all of their ships. Like, it's not a serious country. Like, it's just not. And their country is aging way faster. The country I'm most worried about, just in terms of like geopolitical instability, is India. Because one, they're way younger. They want to basically, they're on the march. They are annoying. And they are basically going to try and turn the entire Indian Ocean into an Indian lake. They are conniving. They are all over our tech industry. right? They run many of our major companies, and they are basically very envious and resentful towards us over colonization, those of us in the West. The Chinese will always cut a deal with us. The Indians are much more conniving, much more vicious, much nastier. And so I am more worried about the Indians generally than the Chinese, who will basically age out of the global competition. They're going to go and have a Japan moment. They're already starting to have it. Um, people freak out about Taiwan. They already control Taiwan, as anybody knows who's been to
Yeah, the
Taiwan.
exports and the imports and stuff. I'm aware of that. No,
Yeah.
the Indian thing I never really thought about. But the other thing I was thinking about too was like you brought up,
Oh, and by the way, as Machine Maverick points out, yeah, China has no water, right? Like its water is deeply polluted, what little it has, and they're basically fucked in large measure because of their soil isn't nutrient rich enough. They need us for all their commodities. So
oh,
like,
absolutely, they need us
you
for
know,
resources and their consumption. Like I think they're probably going to overfish the ocean at some point. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
definitely.
it's a big issue for them. One thing we have going for us is resources. It seems like it's at the cost of like labor
I'll
skill
give you an
and
example of this,
knowledge.
right? So China just gave Felix Tshisekedi, who's the dictator of the Democratic Republic of Congo, he went over to China and they gave him like a $300 million bribe in his accounts in Dubai, which we knew where the money was going. We knew the account numbers. All those accounts just got frozen, by the way. And Felix is basically like, he's a dumb African who wants to basically like enslave his people and get all the resources out of the ground so that, China can make whatever widgets, batteries, fine, whatever. And we know this, so like Felix is going to get leveraged now by the US government because our capabilities of knowing who knows what in the world, like we're world class at espionage. Like we are the dominant player in that game. And rather than steal from people and rip them off, which is what China does and Israel does, and to some extent what the French do, we are like actually pretty judicious with our use of these powers. So I would just say in general, like I think there's something about America where we like to freak out constantly if any country gets anywhere near us in terms of like economic. I mean, China's economy exists because we allow it to exist. Like, make no mistake about we could change in a heartbeat on all kinds of issues. Like, we're already like changing our trade policies with Vietnam, with Indonesia. I mean, we don't have to deal with them anymore. They need us way more than we need them. So I just think in general, um, people need to kind of understand, like America, when it's actually working correctly, is so powerful. The only thing the Chinese could hope to do is confuse us by running like propaganda campaigns on Twitter or like getting weird Jews like the Daily Wire people to like sell us all kinds of weird propaganda or like get weird Canadians like Jordan Peterson to like be our surrogate fathers. Like we are just so powerful a country. And we're especially powerful when we're not like dying in the desert in the Middle East, as you well know, Patrick. And like I think people need to just like take a step back and realize that like America's pretty powerful and we don't have to live the way we've been living. Like we could really do a lot to clean up all these spies in our society. We're actually pretty generous to them as far as things go. So I don't know. That's just my general sense on it.
That was interesting. I didn't mean to take it off topic, but the one thing I wanted to like pick your brain about because you got me fired up earlier, just like kind of thinking about it, and you know, yeah, I mean, like, I think like any way you look at it, like, especially at like this point in time, like for like the next election, like Biden's probably going to win. Like, I mean, either he won the last election through like, an honest and fair election, like the popular vote, or it was rigged. So I think like it's going to, have the same outcome. And I think like the Republican Party is like, kind of in like serious trouble. Like, and this is just like from my perspective, just floating around here on Twitter. like my social circle in real life is kind of small. Like all the people I know in school, like my small cohort, foreigners, are all like liberals. But then like on my like my army friends, they're all like Republican rednecks, diehard Trump supporters. And I never left Fort Bragg. Like my house is still in North Carolina, like a county away, and it's like a small county, like probably like the size of Rhode Island with 40,000 people, and everyone there is a diehard Trump person. And then like on the other end, like coming across like Republicans on Twitter, they're all like the same, like diehard Trump supporters. And to be honest, like the only DeSantis supporters like I've come across painfully, I'd have to say, are like on a huge Twitter spaces that I stumbled into like from mutual contacts. And it's really painful to listen to. But to be honest, like,
they're just straight up pathetic, aren't they?
it's just weird to me. It's like cool, like, but that, like I don't know what's worse, like the diehard Trump people, which I know more of, or like the like weird boomer type, like
I mean, just listen to like go and re-listen to DeSantis's like announcement on Spaces, and he's like, "Oh, you can do Bitcoin." Like it was just like a totally not reading the room in the real world, and these people are they're not players. Like they don't.
Yeah, I don't think DeSantis has a chance. But to be honest, man, like whenever I knew Christie, like I think he was like governor of New Jersey. Or, I don't know, like as a kid, like watching him on TV. But to be honest, like the only people who've mentioned like Christie is being serious that I've come across is like a small niche between like you and Tom. And you guys opened my eyes. Like I thought it was pretty cool how he prosecuted, Kushner, which too bad he couldn't get his son.
No, I mean Christie is clearly Christie's job. So Christie he's there to be a spare in case Biden dies or falters or whatever, and his job is basically to fuck up Trump.
Yeah, but do you think he really can with like the vast majority? I mean, this is just based on my perspective, but it just seems like there's so many Trump cult supporters that like it makes the Republican Party pretty much useless till he's gone in some way or another. That's just
I mean, Trump lost a shitload of white voters. If between 2016 and 2020, like it turns out, like a lot of white working class people and a lot of like suburban whites weren't interested in the Platinum Plan or in all the weird like Hug a Thug initiatives that Trump was pursuing. So yeah, I mean, I think that Trump's presidency was a failure in pretty much every respect, and it just is what it is. Like if you're an honest person, you have to admit that.
That's what I wanted to ask you about too, because it was really confusing to me. Because like in my perspective, it's probably screwed anyway. But like you mentioned, like you said, the Israelis turned on him. And one of the reasons I never voted at all, but one of the reasons like I don't like Trump is kind of the way he like promised everything to us, but then did it for Israel instead. At least in my perspective. So like, why do you think like they turned on him if they did?
I think they're just disposing of assets right now. I think that's what the Israelis do is they build you up and they like give you access and they whatever. They try to get you to commit small levels of crime, whatever. And then they turn on you and turn you off as an asset. Have you killed? Have you killed yourself? They dispose of people. That's what the Israelis do. So with Trump now, they look out and they see, well, we've got DeSantis on the one hand. Well, it depends which Israelis too, because they have their own divisions. But we have Netanyahu essentially twisting in the wind right now with mass protests. He's essentially very limited in terms of what he can do worldwide. He's fighting for his political survival and really his own survival because he's going to go to prison. Like he's got 3 corruption trials running against him. Like he loses power, like he's done. Like
what's the biggest threat to the Likud party in Israel, by the way?
Well, the biggest threat is that the military-industrial intelligence community doesn't like them. So like basically what Netanyahu did as an Ashkenazim is he threw in with Sephardim, which you're like not supposed to do in Israel. Like the Ashkenazis are supposed to be the dominant power in Israel because like they're the smartest and the richest. Now they don't reproduce at the same rate as the Sephardim or the Orthodox or whatever. So what Netanyahu did was he built a coalition of those people. And what's going to happen is that over the next 3 to 5 years, you're going to see all the Netanyahu assets get destroyed in different ways. And it's already happening now. Like you can see this with like the attention where YouTube is like turning off all of these assets, or like the turning of Peter Thiel, where Palantir is suddenly going to be in the UK, right? It's like, come on, like people know what that is, right? It's or like the Israelis who like had all their espionage all over Illumina, and like Illumina got transformed in like the last 2 months. So yeah, I mean we are in a sweep right now, and there have been other sweeps throughout history. We're just in a particular one where we're sweeping out all the Russian influence, and we're sweeping out all the Israeli influence, and we're sweeping out most of the Chinese influence in the key areas. And
Well,
this is a level of state power that I think people have not really seen before, but it's like clearly happening as we speak.
that's interesting. Maybe I'm over like compensating, like because my circle's kind of small, like for all these brain dead like Trump cultists like in the
Well, I
Republican
mean, those
Party.
people don't really matter. Like, not to be rude about it, right? But they don't matter, right? Like most people's friends, like, don't really have a say in how the country is governed, right? Fortunately.
Yeah, absolutely. But I was just thinking of like people I know like that are like say to be Republican, they all seem to like support Trump like diehard to the point where it's like it could be like a big problem for the party almost.
Oh, I mean, the Republican Party's biggest problem is that they're not appealing to people who are intelligent, right? They don't offer anything. They are the oil lobby, right? They're the vehicle for the oil lobby to get what it wants. They're a vehicle for the Israelis to influence our national system so they can get a claim on the 330 million Americans that live here and our access to our markets. And like the Republicans they really have nothing. Like they don't have a dominant vision. Like there's no reason to be a Republican, right? There's nothing there for you. If you're smart, like they'll just exploit you and abuse you. Like that is just the reality of it. Whereas the Democrats actually require a lot of like smart white normal people running their show because otherwise they have a whole lot of like weird like crazy fringe minority groups or weird, they're just like they're a coalition of weirdos. So I think, in a certain sense, Joe Biden, by being the candidate of the suburbs and of like normal white people, this guy likes ice cream and drives Corvettes, right? Like everybody knows somebody like this from their hometown. Um, and he's personable. And if he were younger, it would be obvious that he would be reelected. But the only real reason he has a problem is that he's going to be 82 in 2024. That's just the only reason we're even talking about like a Chris Christie alternative. And Christie's job, basically, is to explain the deep state to a Republican voter base that doesn't want to hear it. Because there's a whole bunch of Republican elites that want to move past Trump, but they know DeSantis is equally bad, if not worse. That's what Christie's job is. And, it'll take place over the next few months, but he's going to continue to be a part of the conversation because Christie is the only one that actually has ideas about how the country should exist and where it should go on the Republican side. I mean, I I listen to the speeches that DeSantis gives, and they're not really arguments. They're not really a vision of where the country should go. It's a grab bag of like, what can I give the far right so that I can make them happy in a general, make them happy in a primary. But we all know that like if by some miracle DeSantis could win the nomination, he would get eaten alive by Joe Biden. Like it wouldn't even be close.
No, I kind of agree. Like,
By the way, people just run the numbers like demographically. The Republicans need to win Arizona, Georgia, and Wisconsin. And they've done very poorly in all three states in the last few elections that we've held in those places. So where are the voters going to come from? It's not there.
That's kind of true. Like, and I really don't think it matters. I think Biden's probably going to win again unless he croaks. And I don't know who would replace him. But like, if you look at like the Republican candidates, like Pence is such a weirdo. Like, I think he's like a closeted homosexual personally. Like, I don't like him that much. And you mentioned the Bragg thing. Like, it's such a non-issue. Kind of like the whole LGBT thing with DeSantis, and it's just like it's already too late. Like they're gonna come for our kids, so it doesn't matter. Like it's just a non-issue. And then you look at like Christie, like he's probably like the least of the worst of the Republican side if you're not a Trump supporter.
I mean,
But like,
Adam, aren't you from New Jersey or like from Philadelphia or something? Like
Yeah, Philadelphia.
so that's like New Jersey. It's like a New Jersey
Yeah,
suburb,
yeah.
right?
Well, I
More
mean,
or
yeah,
less.
it's the same. Like my dad goes to work every day in Jersey, so yeah, you know.
So what do you? I mean, you recall Christie as governor, right?
Vaguely, yeah. I mean, I wasn't paying as much attention to politics at the time, but
What's your sense?
my sense is that, like, kind of what you've been saying is that he's electable to people like my aunt and uncle who are independent. My uncle was in the military. My cousin was actually born on a base in Germany because they were there. My aunt and uncle were both serving when they were when the Berlin Wall fell. And anyway, they're independents, and it's kind of funny to see, like, you read the stuff on Twitter where they talk about like Nikki Haley or even Pence or somebody like that, that they're, oh my God, why are they even trying? Nobody is ever going to vote. And I just think, like, yeah, normal people, like, the people in my family, like, they would absolutely vote for somebody like that that's kind of in the middle. And so I do think Christie has that thing of, like, he was a Republican governor in a clearly blue state. Um, and yeah, I think he can, you know, make the argument that, like, he would be a Republican that had, he would be the anti-Trump. He was a prosecutor. He had a fairly scandal-free, aside from shutting down the George Washington Bridge or whatever. Um, yeah, I think he had a um, pretty good run as governor. And I think that that's very sellable to people. I think maybe that's one of the reasons Romney got as close as he did with Obama, was that he was kind of making the argument that, like, yeah, I'm a Republican, but I'm I was governor of Massachusetts. So what does that tell you?
Yeah, I gotta say, I think Christie was a way better governor of New Jersey than Romney was of Massachusetts.
Right. Yeah, I just meant that he couldn't.
I don't think that Romney could have gotten reelected in Massachusetts.
Yeah, right. Um, but yeah, I actually was gonna go back to the stuff you guys were talking about with Richard and when we were talking about the culture and whether or not it matters, because it reminded me of there's this amazing quote from some documentary. I wish I could remember what it's from, but it was the actor Mike Myers, because he's Canadian, and he was saying something along the lines of, like, um, the Romans took over the world by, like, military strategy, and the English took over the world um, with their navy, with the three-mast ship. That's how they did it. And he said America took over the world um, uh, with movie theaters. That essentially, and I just looked it up again because I know I had read before that our number one export was still culture, was still movies, film, music, entertainment, and it looks like it's still either our number one or number two export. And yeah, I just think, like, we shouldn't underestimate the power that that had. And I couldn't find the exact quote, but I found a couple other ones from him that are pretty interesting. Um, He said, every country has certain people who are visionaries, who have the gift to make things. Often these people are called strivers. In America, these strivers are celebrated. Edison, the Wright brothers, Steve Jobs, etc. In Canada, we have no tradition for cultivating, protecting, and ultimately celebrating our strivers. And then he said, I like to think of the relationship between Canada and the U.S. as that of two brothers. We both share the same mother, Britain. Canada and the United States grew up in the same house, North America. The difference is the United States left home as a teenager to go and become a movie star, and Canada decided to stay home and live with mother. And yeah, I just think that obviously we still do dominate all of those things. Like, if you're a musician from any other country, you don't feel like you've made it until you're on the radio in America. Like, that's the sign that you've arrived. And I do think that it can't be understated that we're not producing even stuff that people celebrate, like Terminal List or whatever, which I was pretty underwhelmed by. Yeah, I do think it's a big loss that we're not a leader in this. I mean, I guess we are still the leader, but I think that it was a way for us to spread our way of life, in a way that cost us nothing. And there's an interesting scene in Mad Men where they're trying to get Hilton to sign up as one of their clients, and he's actually talking to Conrad Hilton, the guy that founded it. And he was talking about how he was going to use Hilton hotels the way missionaries use churches to spread the American way of life around the world. And yeah, I don't know. I think us kind of, letting that go, I think it's a mistake. I think it's a mistake to not,
I think it just happens naturally, though.
that it is happening
I mean,
naturally, you mean?
yeah. I mean, we are the dominant Western power in the world. Like, there's 330 million of us.
Right.
It's like there's no other country that even has 100 million that's like in the West. I think Britain is like maybe 60
Yeah, there's
million,
60
70
million.
million,
Yeah.
something like that.
Right.
Yeah. So, like, we control a lot of the world.
Yeah. And I think it is kind of a shame that, because the people that started Hollywood were proud Americans. Like, a lot of them were immigrants, but they were proud to be here. And, they wanted to preserve this way of life and spread this way of life. And,
I think the propaganda in the U.S. has gotten a lot weaker, just in general.
internally or externally? Like,
Both ends.
yeah.
Both
Right.
ends. I mean, I think that a movie works. It's like what? It's like 2 hours,
Mm-hmm.
2.5 hours. You escape the world. You have these like dancing things on the screen. Maybe you believe in the characters, or you relate to them, or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
You go through this psyop, which is basically a movie is a consensual psyop.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, you're allowing yourself to get brainwashed.
Yeah, and you watch it, but like the kids now, like the younger kids, don't even watch movies. They like watch the clips.
Mm-hmm.
They're on
Right.
TikTok, or whatever. And like, what did China do? China was like, oh, we're just going to control technology.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to control like your relationship to your phone.
Yeah.
And we're going to build all the pieces of your phone.
Right.
We're going to invest in a whole bunch of Silicon Valley people like Jack Dorsey and Elon Musk, and we're going to basically run those people as our personal pets. And they're going to tell you what it means to be an entrepreneur, to be successful, to be a billionaire, whatever. Like that's the game that was being played.
Yeah. I mean, they're so clearly running our game plan. Like, I remember a few years ago, somebody told me I had to read the book Confessions of an Economic Hitman, which I'm sure.
Yeah, I remember reading that too back in the day.
Yeah, which for anybody who's not familiar, basically the guy works for the IMF, and his job is to come up with phony economic reports that justify them giving out loans to third world countries, ostensibly so that they can, build an electrical grid or some kind of infrastructure project like that. but the money never even leaves the U.S. because it immediately goes to U.S. contractors, and we want them to get into debt because once they're in debt, we can control, how they vote at the UN and stuff like that. And it's like that's
I think all that stuff is overdetermined,
ye-
but there is something to
yeah,
it.
I know, yeah, for sure. I mean, he was, what all I mean is that you could describe the Belt and Road Initiative in the same way. And like you said, with what they're doing with TikTok, it's like they saw how America could dominate the culture of the world and said, okay, well,
Well, it's all there. What Wang Huning talks about in America Against America is he basically says, if you really want to freak out the U.S., just take away their technological domination. Because the second their society doesn't hang together, um, you know, um, their shit doesn't hang together like that.
right,
So,
right, yeah. And I think it's sad that in 2016, because of the Russian influence thing, and it became such a dividing line where everybody on the right said there's no way in hell, um, any foreign powers are messing with us. This is one thing I've realized, just especially, reading your stuff and paying attention to stuff you guys have been talking about for the last few months, is like, if people only knew just how bad we're being fucked with 24/7 by so many different countries and entities and companies, and that so many of the things that are um, seemingly dividing people are coming, from it's not happening naturally. I always tell people that, especially people who didn't grow up in America, who aren't from here. I always say, like, if you want to know about America, you should just go to Wawa at 7 in the morning and just watch people, because basically everybody just needs to get to work. And it's like people are getting coffee. It's like, oh, do you need the cream? They hand them the cream. Like, they get in line. Oh, you were in front of me in line. Nobody, they hold the door open for each other. Nobody, before they hand somebody, the sugar for their coffee, is like, wait, where are your parents from? Or like, where did you grow up? You know what I mean? Like, Americans just need to get to work. And I think that's like the reality of it. And everything else, a lot of these other things pretty much only exist online, and then sometimes boil over into like if the Proud Boys and Antifa get into a fight or whatever, then it's boiled over into real life. But for the most part, Americans are marrying each other, hooking up with each other, just getting along. That's why, like, it's such big news when there's some sort of racial uh, incident. Like, if it was such a racist country and people were really at each other's throats, then it wouldn't be national news every time, something that sort of looked like a swastika ended up somewhere or whatever. You know what I mean?
I do know what you mean. But I think we're in a stage now where people, like, the doomerish nonsense that Richard was saying earlier is like, it's not going to work anymore. Like, the optimism and vision thing for America is itself a geopolitical strength. So there's this sort of attitude that, like, there's sort of like several ways of thinking. So there's one view is like the U.S. can't do anything, it can't do anything, this kind of learned helplessness bullshit,
Mm-hmm.
which you hear a lot from a lot of Silicon Valley people. There's just like a lot of like bitching, whining and bitching. Then there's the group that is like, oh, America's the greatest. Like, it's awesome. It's wonderful. Everything's great here. Like, just super, like, in la la land. And then there's a group that's like, hey, let's fix the problems we have. Here are the problems. This is how we intend to fix them. That vision is much more compelling, I think. And I think the problem with the Republicans, just generally, is nobody's really willing to do that. So,
Yeah, well, that would
anyway,
require them having an idea about
yes,
what to fix, or how to fix it, or
yes.
anything like that. And
Yeah, I mean, and just look at the content that Christie put out tonight, right? Like, that is an argument.
right,
So, anyway, I'm going to close it out in a second, unless anyone has anything deeply compelling that they want to say. I have to get up in a few hours, and I have family in town. It's my sister's wedding on a Friday, so I'll be out and about. Written some interesting things at the Substack about this stuff, if I do say so myself. I think that might be compelling to some people. Um, Generally speaking, I think we're in a moment where things are very, very in flux in the country. My read, more or less, is that Trump is fucked from this indictment, because clearly they have a lot more that they're holding back because it's national security related. They never hit you with the full thing. And yeah, I mean, I think in general we're in a very chaotic moment. So just have people kind of pay attention, look at what's going on out there. I highly recommend people watch or people read the Jacobin piece that I put up there about Barack Obama and basically how he sold out American workers, because I think it's important. And yeah, I think Machine Maverick is right. The middle class is about to come roaring back. I mean, middle class Joe is delivering in his weird, old way. And, his salaries are catching up, and interest rates are forcing the recorrection of asset prices. So life is good. I mean, life could be better, but we're moving in the right direction.
yeah, and
So I hope that.
I also think that there will be some sort of breakthrough in Ukraine leading up to 2024. That
Oh,
Yeah, that
obviously. Yeah.
he's either gonna solve Biden's either gonna
Yeah.
solve the problem
No, I mean,
entirely,
Joe
or
Biden is going to go into 2024 having won the Ukraine conflict, 100%,
yeah, yes, agreed.
because it's the only outcome that's possible, and it's the only outcome. Like, the Ukraine war goes on as long as China wants it to, and that Christie said today it's a proxy war between the U.S. and China. I think he's exactly right. But hopefully that'll get sorted out too, and maybe it will. All right. Good night, everyone. I hope you have a very lovely week, and catch up soon. Bye.